So we have Mr. Anurag Agarwal, who is the CEO and partner at Aavishkar Capital. We have Dr. Mansi Naik Agarwal, who is the partner at Alkemi Venture Partners. We also have Mr. Dinesh Goel, who is a venture capitalist and angel investor, and he's also a partner at Siana Capital. Our moderator, Anand Saklecha, has not been able to join, but we are still starting this session.
So, Mansi, you want to go first?
Sure. Hi everyone, it's such a pleasure to be part of this conference and be able to interact with the esteemed speakers as well as the audience, hopefully towards the end of the session. I am Mansi Agarwal. I'm representing Alkemi Partners today. We are a healthcare and a wellness focused fund based in Delhi. We focus on investing in Series A investments, typically in the range of $3 to $5 million. And since our inception about 2 years ago, we've made about 5 investments. I think healthcare by definition itself is an impact sector, and I think I am very proud and excited to be part of this. As my background, I'm a doctor by training, but since the last 10-12 years, I have been in the venture capital investing business in the healthcare space primarily, but have looked at a lot of consumer businesses as well. And with Alkemi now, like I said, we focus a lot on healthcare investments in India and globally.
Hi everybody, I'm glad to be here. I'm Dinesh Goel. I started my journey in investing as an angel investor, and a couple of years ago we started this new firm called Siana Capital. So I'm partner with Siana Capital. Our core investment thesis is to mainstream impact. So we invest in innovative products, innovative solutions which use science and technology and also create some sustainable impact and contribute to SDGs of the United Nations. At least 3 or 4 SDGs each investment should sort of be aligned with. So that's our core investment thesis. I mean, in our first fund, we made a few investments now, though we are still raising the fund. I mean, we haven't closed it yet. And look forward to having discussions on this panel today.
All right, thank you. This is Anurag. I am the group CEO and partner at Aavishkar Capital. Aavishkar Group is essentially an impact-focused platform which was set up 20 years ago. I've been part of this group for the last 15 years and been involved in all segments of the platform. So within this platform, we manage roughly close to about $1 billion. We have Aavishkar Capital, which is our investing arm. We are currently on our 6th fund. We manage close to about $400 million of assets. We've made about 60 plus investments across sectors, including financial inclusion, agri and livelihoods, healthcare, clean water, waste, sanitation. So across a wide range of sectors, we've made about 60 odd investments. I think at the time when we started investing in this space, essentially investing in underserved geographies and underserved markets in businesses that are catering to low-income population. This term impact investing itself didn't exist, so we are considered one of the global pioneers in this space. One of the challenges that we had was, what was essentially, a space which was meant for not for profits. And when we talked about development, the usual format was not for profit. What we've tried to do is to establish that this activity can be done in for-profit manner and at scale. So what we've managed to do is over the last 20 years through this platform, made about 65 investments through our investing arm. We also have 2 NBFCs within our group, one focused on microfinance, a company called Arohan, which currently caters to about 23 million poor women directly. We also have a SME lending arm, which provides working capital finance to early stage needs through clusters and through use of technology. And we have an advisory company called IntelliCap, which provides consulting, research, and investment banking services to enterprises that are working in the space. Within IntelliCap, we also run a platform called Sankalp, where we try and bring together various ecosystem players. So essentially, through this platform, what we are trying to do is to support entrepreneurs who are trying to solve difficult problems in for-profit business models that are focusing on low-income populations, either trying to increase income or reduce vulnerability in some form. Over this period, through various initiatives, we have managed to reach out to close to about 110 million beneficiaries. And we started doing this in India and are in the process of trying to replicate this in Southeast Asia and Africa as well. I'll stop there and take more questions.
Hello all. I'm Avkash here. Anand sir had some difficulties in joining, so I'll take forward this session with all of you. So welcome to the session on impact value commercialization for social startups. Let's start with thinking social startups as the ones who target both profitability as well as a social impact. So I would like to have each of your views on this take, that how are present days social startups catering to both of these roles, creating value and at the same time having profitability for its investors. So Anurag sir, you can start, sir, if you want.
Sure. So, like I was saying, right from the beginning, our investment thesis or the purpose of our existence was to basically take business and opportunities to underserved markets and low-income populations. So, for us, it is the core part of the investment itself. So, while on one hand, each investment that we would make, whether it is in financial inclusion or agri or livelihood or waste management or water impact and what sort of impact it is creating, either in terms of creating employment opportunities or reducing cost or providing access to something which is essential to these segments of population which hitherto have not had access to. It has to be a core part of the business itself. So as the business scales, that impact also gets magnified through the business. At the same time, because we are dealing with other people's money and want to do this at scale, it's important that the business has strong unit economics and its ability to scale to a large size. Otherwise, it just becomes an experiment. So what we have been able to do through our investments is basically demonstrate that you can do both together rather than one coming at the cost of the other. As I had mentioned, we've made about 65 odd investments, and we've also made about 32 exits, full and partial, all of those investments for the last 20 years. And what we've been able to demonstrate that you can create, so in these 32 odd exits, we've been able to generate roughly 3x multiple on these investments with an average holding period of about 5-6 years, which is fairly, it translates into an IRR on these investments of about 25%, which is a fairly competitive return that you would look to generate even in the mainstream world. Our belief is that the time of impact investing in social businesses has come, especially in these times where there's so much disruption due to COVID and so many other climate-related issues. So this would now, while this has been a very niche space from the time we started, from virtually not being known to transition where even large mainstream funds, KKR, Bain, you would have seen have announced impact funds, amounting to billions of dollars. So this is now, caught the attention of the investing world. And going forward, our belief is that impact is really going to be the mainstream. You cannot really do a business or any investing activity without factoring this in.
So you're right, Anurag. I mean, I don't think social impact or societal impact is mutually exclusive to profitable, scalable business model. Of course, I mean, there are philanthropic organizations which don't expect a return on their capital and look at it more from a charity perspective. But the sustainability of the impact comes only when the business is making money, the models are creating affordable access or impacting the people who are otherwise not on the economic highway, so to speak, right? So with the acceleration of science and technology driving more and more innovation, and that pace is only increasing, we feel that new products, innovative products and solutions can, from an inclusion perspective, create social impact as well as affordable products and solutions. So whether it's in terms of point of care solutions, or improving farmer incomes, or precision farming in agriculture space, or providing remote education to the people who don't have access to quality education. So education, healthcare, agriculture, vernacular language services. I mean, there are plenty of ventures which are built on sustainable, profitable business models, and they are creating direct impact on the society, on the people who otherwise don't have access to the solutions, and have an ability to uplift themselves. So we studied the space, and that's exactly what we mounted our investment thesis on. We feel that you don't have to compromise necessarily on profitability, but you can still create impact and measure impact created by these ventures. Of course, I mean, there are certain sectors which don't lend themselves to an impact, such as entertainment, gaming, and those type of things. But if you're in the right sectors and you're using innovative products and solutions, they can create impact and coexist with profitability. And from a trends perspective, like we are a relatively new fund and new firm focused on this space, we feel that both globally as well as in India, such capital and interest is increasing. And in the times to come, there should be more capital, more risk capital available, which will also see impact as well as create a return for the investors. So we see this trend gaining more strength going forward, as it has in the last 5-6 years.
Mansi, you got cut off. You want to add anything?
Mansi.
Yeah. So yeah, like I said, healthcare lends itself to social impact just by the ability to save people's lives. And the way we look at healthcare and impact is not only social impact but also.
Right, ma'am. Ma'am, looking at some of the case studies around the world, the work which has been done by various impact funds around the globe, which have been making quite a big impact for, say, be it a climate and biodiversity, be it setting up solar panels, be it Fin Canada, who is into basically women economic empowerment, be it a Sweet Fund, who is into investment of renewable resources. Ma'am, what do you think are current trends, considering Indian scenario, which could have a big, larger global impact in terms of commercialization and in terms of delivering value?
Akash, I don't think Mansi is on the panel. He's dropped off again.
Okay. Anurag sir, can you take up this question?
Yeah, sure. So I think our experience has been that India has been one of the leaders in this impact space, purely going by in terms of our population and the segment, the large segment of that population that is below a certain level of income. India becomes both the largest market and also the biggest laboratory for any experiments that are related to impact. In terms of the global capital towards impact that is allocated towards impact, you would also find that invariably anybody who is serious about impact investments, or is even operating at a global level on impact, they would have a very serious focus towards India. Within India, in impact space, the early momentum was really in the financial inclusion space, particularly microfinance, where very early on we were able to establish a sound business model. So initially, a lot of capital really flowed there, and there was validation of that, impact investment thesis through also, exits and returns on that capital, and also fairly large scale. It also got criticized quite a bit, that are people making too much money out of poor people, and is just a pure vanilla debt funding model the right model for impact. So people have also experimented quite a bit around trying to broaden the scope of financial services. So now, the financial inclusion space, which primarily started with credit in the microfinance mode, has gone way beyond that. It is now expanded to the MSME space. It has expanded horizontally in terms of service offerings on the savings side, on insurance side. So there's a lot of good work that has happened out there in terms of expansion of scope of the financial inclusion. Also, broadly within the impact investment community, a lot of the early funds and funding was really going towards that one sector. It was disproportionately large towards that sector. But over the last 10 years, even that has expanded quite a bit. So agri is another sector. Our own experience in the agri and livelihood sector has been very good, even from a return perspective. So it has taken some time, and typically what we find that unlike financial inclusion, where you can scale very rapidly because the numbers are very large and the product is quite simple, uh, and you are essentially in the business of giving money to people. In businesses where you are to sell to these customers and actually, which can be a much harder thing. The time to scale up and the size and scale of these entities, it takes a much longer time. But if you have access to patient capital, you can create value in some of these other sectors also. So of late, we are seeing a lot of funding now going towards the agri sector in particular, where some interesting business models have come up both on the supply side as well as on the output side. We ourselves have a fairly large portfolio in agri, which ranges from a grain bank, which is trying to digitize the farmer produce uh, and convert it into a sort of a currency of sorts, easily tradable, to a company which is almost like Amazon and Facebook for farmers on the input side, and quite a few companies on the output side as well, all doing quite well and at reasonable scale, and also able to generate significant investor interest, which allows early stage fund to exit. It allows scale to happen, and these companies are actually very well aligned even with the government initiatives. As you know, the Prime Minister has been constantly talking about doubling farmer income and things like that. And so agri and financial services are two sectors where we've seen maximum traction in the space. Things like healthcare, etc., have been more challenging since we have somebody who's a specialist in healthcare investment. Maybe once she comes back, she can talk a little bit more on that. But we've also seen very good opportunity and traction in sectors like sanitation. So we invested in a company which was, even before the Swachh Bharat mission came about, which was trying to set up toilets in places where it was not portable toilets, like, for example, in construction sites, in places like Kumbh Mela, etc. That got pretty good traction. In fact, recently exited that company by selling to another investor. So been able to attract a lot of capital even internationally. We have investment in a company which is probably India's largest waste management platform called Netra. It is exclusively in dry waste. They are setting up these material recovery facilities across the country. Much needed problem. And the business model is such which is extremely profitable and capital efficient. And we are able to attract capital. In fact, we are just signing a new term sheet of significant capital in that company this week, which is from a specialist fund which is focused on circular economy. So these are unique businesses that are attracting international capital, are scaling up rapidly, have strong business economics, and are creating a lot of impact. And the more they grow, the more the impact is very inherent in their business model. So there are lots of such case studies within India. Our own experience has been pretty good. Like I told you, on an aggregate level, 25% IRR is comparable to the best of best BC funds, even on the technology side. So India has enough and more examples on that.
Dinesh, sir, your
If
take
you
on
want
that, sir?
to add anything from your experience?
So I think Anurag has covered most of the points. I will just say that, I mean, it's correct that finance probably was the leading sector, microfinance in particular from an inclusion perspective, which saw a lot of companies spawn and also scale across the country. notwithstanding the regulatory challenges that they ran into. But you can't take away the fact that they contributed a lot to credit access to primarily bottom of the pyramid sections of the society, right? So they did a lot of good there. The other sectors which have significant potential have not yet seen the scale and impact that is possible, and versus the potential of a country like India. So whether it's education, whether it's healthcare, even agriculture. I mean, agriculture has some successes because there are firms like Omnivore which have been focused on it for almost a decade now, or maybe a decade plus. And as Anurag said, I mean, Aavishkar has a good portfolio of agri-tech investments too. But versus our farming population and their socio-economic profile, that impact is yet to be delivered, I would say, at the scale which it needs to from an impact perspective. Similarly, healthcare, people have tried different models, affordable hospitals, affordable diagnostic chains, teleconsultation, and so on and so forth. Barring few sparks of success here and there, again, nothing has happened at a nationwide level yet. So that's again a sector which holds a lot of promise and potential, but which has not seen it play out yet in terms of impact. So I would say, given that the technology plumbing has happened with the likes of Geo, broadband internet connection everywhere across the length and breadth of the country, almost all pin codes are on that internet highway now, and affordable smartphones and computing power and so on and so forth available even to people who are not so well educated, right? And a lot of things, applications and services rendered and available in terms of interface as a vernacular interface. I think the time is ripe. The time is set that the impact that we will see even from non-financial sectors in a country like India going forward, we believe will be huge in the next 5 to 6 years from the other sectors too. Financial services, of course, will continue to drive that impact with innovation, with new products, new offerings, and so on and so forth. But other sectors will also become mainstream in terms of delivering the impact, which is what we are hoping for, and we want to make some bets in those sectors. All these sectors are of interest to us as a fund, and we are hoping to be part of that journey and to do our bit in the coming years.
Right, sir. Some great examples, sir. So one thing to talk about on this topic specifically is that for all social startups, it's very in the early stages. It's very important for them to scale up. So while scaling up, they might face certain challenges in like pitching up to the investors, making their business model viable, projecting their future in front of the all impact funds. So, sir, what according to you plays a very crucial, important role for these social startups in order to consider the pitching aspect of it, in order to get it commercialized in actual sense, and not just be a social startup and come into the commercialization phase? So, what can you just suggest, or what are your parameters, or what is your take on this, sir?
So, do you want Anurag to go first, or?
So you can go. So you can go.
Okay, all right. See, I mean, our approach to in talking to entrepreneurs, Avakash, is that we look at the scalability of the offering of the product. We look at the pain point or the impact that it can potentially drive, and we look at the unit economics and the pricing at which it can drive that impact with the affordability of the target audience, right? So all those things are important, because if you just have something which can create impact and you don't look at the commercial aspects of it, which is what you would do in any venture, right? Or
Right,
any startup, right? So which is about scalability, about unit economics, about sustainability of the business model, the quality of the team, their passion, and so on and so forth. You marry that you marry that with the impact and the passion of the entrepreneurs, which is beyond profit motive, right? So they should also have keen interest in driving that impact, and it shouldn't be just incidental from our perspective, because if the team is considering impact as only incidental, versus co-objective, which is equally important as they scale their venture, that becomes very important to drive both objectives. Otherwise, maybe they happen to be in that sector, maybe the idea was such that it can potentially create impact, but the motive of the team and the venture is only profit. Then along the journey, you will find that there will be compromise as far as impact is concerned. So those are the sort of criteria which are important to us from as we talk to entrepreneurs and as we evaluate their pitches.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, for us, if we are looking at, at Aavishkar Group, we are not just investors, we are entrepreneurs ourselves. And, just to sort of make this more relatable for any entrepreneurs who might be there in the audience, we didn't start with a very large amount of capital. We started with only about 1 lakh rupees of capital to begin with. I have been myself part of this journey. When I joined in 2005, we were about 56 people, everybody at, under the age of 30. Only the founders had crossed the age of 30. And our combined AUM was, $1 million. So Aavishkar, when it started, this whole concept of, investing in rural India for impact, this whole impact investment category itself didn't exist. So it was extremely hard to raise capital. It took us 5 years to raise the first 5 crores. And that was the size of the fund when I became part of this. Today, we manage close to about 7,500 crores across the platform. And not just the investing business, but we are also running businesses ourselves. So, what got us this far? Number one, I would say as an entrepreneur, the most important thing is that you have to have belief, strong conviction, and the ability to stay the course. So persistence, I think, could be a very, very strong quality. The initial team that has come together, it has to be very strongly aligned and bound together to that common purpose and that common conviction. So until and unless that is there, most likely investors will see through it. You have to be, going after a unique problem that you strongly believe in needs to be solved. Whether it is impact focused or business focused, that is less important. It's more a question of, what is that unique problem that you're trying to solve. So if it is in that impact space, you are likely to attract impact investors. If it is not in the impact space, you have many other kinds of investors who can fund that idea. But if you're just chasing something which is hot and it's a Me Too idea, which a lot of other people are doing, chances are that you will not get it, right? Do you have a team which brings in complementary skills, or you've just put together a set of people who have basically are friends or who know each other from before, and just chasing something which is hot? That is easily seen through. Also, what is the sort of ambition of this team? Because scale will be extremely important for any investors. It's very easy to get in. A lot of people are thinking about how do I attract capital, but they are not thinking about how will I give exit to that capital. So that I think if you want to attract somebody who will invest, you have to also think about how will that person get out. That orientation is extremely important for an entrepreneur. That how does he think about, and not necessarily that every business needs to be funded from external capital. So if you can build something which is of value over a period of time, get it to a point where you are able to validate unit economics, etc. There are certain things which require capital upfront, but there are certain things which can also be built organically over a period of time. And maybe it is not the best time to take that capital upfront because you'll end up diluting too much too early. So those are some of the things that one should keep in mind. But your ability to slug it out, your demonstrated ability to weather different kind of storms and grow in spite of that, create something unique. The strength that you can demonstrate in terms of the complementary skills that the team brings together. Going to difficult areas rather than easy to reach areas. Those are the things that will attract capital.
Right. So some really good points for all the budding investors or the entrepreneurs. The importance of having a good team able to gel and having a product that creates value. So moving on, sir, as an entrepreneur, many times there are questions of protecting the interest of all, be it your beneficiaries, be it your investors, or be it the social impact for which your entire setup is being formed. So how do you deal, how do you manage the interests of all the beneficiaries and continue with your journey in your entrepreneurship life cycle, sir?
Well, I would say, I mean, entrepreneurship to begin with is not something which is an easy journey, right? So a lot of people jump into it because it's become fashionable to talk about. I have a startup. I am an entrepreneur. I'm a founder of a company. I mean, that's become a fashionable thing to say in social circuit. So don't do that. I mean, there are books that are available by seasoned and successful entrepreneurs, including failed entrepreneurs, which one should read and realize that how challenging it is to be an entrepreneur, right? And this is regardless of the time, because to start a venture and to scale and grow a venture successfully is full of challenges. Okay, and those challenges include managing stakeholders and their interest as a component of that. So you have to manage your investors. If it is not a bootstrapped venture, you have to manage your co-investors, co-founders. You have to manage your customers, employees, your network of offices if you have your product roadmap. I mean, it's just list just goes on and on. So which is why, as Anurag mentioned, I mean, it is critical that people walk in to start an enterprise with as much clarity as possible on what they intend to do. They should have researched the space. They should have a good complementary team. This is not a war that a lone ranger can win and aim to fight for. So you need to have a good team which has complementary skills, and everybody should be prepared to give their best, to lift that venture. So it's a very hard journey, of which I would say stakeholder management is just one part. You have to fight so many fronts, and slowly that just becomes, I wouldn't say easier, but you are able to delegate some of that work as you are able to expand your team with revenues generated by the business, or funding given by the investors, etc. So as you scale and expand, you can little bit start delegating, but that doesn't reduce your level of accountability or responsibility. So it's a very hard journey. It has its own rewards if you are successful, and if you are built as a mindset, as a DNA to be an entrepreneur. It has a lot of rewards, and we read a lot about that in the media. But I'm saying people should not jump into it because it's fashionable to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. These kind of conflicts will come into play if you're not clear about what you stand for right up front. So especially when you move from being a founder-driven enterprise. In fact, these kind of conflicts can come very often between founders themselves and the team, senior team. It's very important that there is clear articulation of what is the purpose of the business, what goals it is chasing, and before you bring before you bring your co-founders on board, or senior team members, or for that matter any investor, you need to have clarity on what are the key objectives of the business, and what are the non-compromisable things that you will not you will not change within that business. Let's say you've done that, and still in spite of that you have some differences that arise down the line. What you would need to then do is to basically do some consensus building and alignment exercise within the team and the investors. And if you're still not able to achieve it, ultimately as the founder, promoter, and management, it is you who are driving the business, and you will have to make sure that the investors fall in line. And if they are still creating trouble for you, you'll need to make sure that they exit the business and you find somebody who's aligned with the business idea.
Right, sir. Really good input, sir, from both of you. Now, sir, moving on, sir. Sir, in impact investing, we define impact as a measure of three parameters. It may impact, be it intent, the contribution, and the measurement aspect of it. So whenever we look at any impact investment, if you as a venture capitalist or as an entrepreneur, so how do you go about capturing the measurement aspect of it? So a startup can have a good intent, they can contribute very well, but on many occasions, the measurement aspect of it is what it lacks sometimes. So, sir, any examples or any case studies that you would like to share, all three of you, in which any startup can equally measure the amount of impact it's creating socially and the returns generated for it, sir?
So I think those impact metrics need to be agreed upfront, on what parameters you will measure the impact. So, where there is at a entity level, where there is, outreach to certain segments of the population, it's quite simple to, measure what is that outreach, what is the amount of capital that has gone there. What is harder to measure is to measure the qualitative aspect of that impact, right? So you may have reached out to 1 million people. What change it has made to their lives is much harder. And how do you associate casuality to that impact, right? Just because you've given a 50,000 rupee loan to somebody doesn't necessarily mean that that person is better off. In fact, if that person doesn't do something productive with that loan, they actually could be worse off. So, there are people who've carried out various studies to actually see what is the actual impact of a particular intervention on people. For some other things, it could be a little bit more straightforward, but something which is indirect, it is hard to measure. What at Aavishkar we try to do is to also segregate, the impact that our portfolio companies are making. So what we try to do is to agree on these impact metrics in terms of how we will evaluate and measure our success, not just in financial parameters, but also in terms of impact parameters. We try and agree to that upfront, and then try and work with the portfolio companies to make sure that it is being reported on a regular basis. And we also look for ways in terms of how do we improve the effectiveness and the qualitative aspect of how do you go deeper and understand it in more depth. So that's a continuous work in progress. But also at the fund level, it's very easy to just aggregate everything that our portfolio companies have done. And since we have a large portfolio, it's very easy to throw large numbers. But what we try to hold ourselves accountable to are things that we are doing as a fund, right? So if we are calling ourselves as an impact fund, are we going to more difficult geographies? Are we going and giving funding to sectors that have not yet received capital? Are we able to leverage that capital by bringing in other people, or getting more debt on top of that equity? So is there more efficient use of capital? And finally, are we able to demonstrate the whole activity of going in, coming out, and thereby proving that this thing works? That as a fund, because we were one of the pioneers in the space, it was extremely important to demonstrate that it actually works. Otherwise, additional capital will not flow. And then we also try and work beyond at the direct company level, because sometimes just the intervention at the company level is not enough. You also need a neighboring environment or ecosystem. So a lot of our efforts also go towards creating that enabling environment. We were, for example, one of the early investors in microfinance. Back in 2006, 2007, we'd already started investing, and we seeded many of these companies. So we try to create MFIN, which is an industry body, which is now a thriving body, and in fact, it's a RBI recognized SRO, which has been very effective in times of crisis to mitigate risks for the sector. For the impact investment industry itself, we created an impact investor council, which is trying to come up with definitions on things like, how do you measure impact, what qualifies as impact investing. There's work happening on things like social stock exchange, etc. So these are all ecosystem building initiatives, which makes the whole space stronger and not just at an individual company.
Yeah. And I'd just like to add here that, I think, like Anurag mentioned, there are upfront metrics that you typically agree with companies, but in certain sectors, just gathering that data itself is a challenge today. So I think that becomes a big challenge. But for example, in healthcare, what we do is look at a lot of access to healthcare, which is the number of beneficiaries, number of patient visits, consultation, number of procedures. That itself lends to some financial metrics that can be tracked over time. The qualitative aspects, like Anurag said, are harder to identify. But we typically work around working with certain regulatory bodies to understand what the current standard of care is and how the companies are improving that in terms of patient satisfaction, in terms of results of medical intervention, etc. And especially for us, it's also about looking at affordability of healthcare as to how many people have been benefited by such a procedure, how many people in various socioeconomic classes have benefited, price benchmarking, etc. So I think those become some of the metrics that get tracked specifically in the healthcare space, and I don't have as much experience as the other people in the panel in other sectors. But I think in healthcare, it is harder to get data. The data is not getting digitized. In fact, we have made an investment in a company that helps digitize data. So I think sometimes, to create an impact and to be able to see the value of it, you have to make investments in companies that are even tracking metrics and helping companies to track some of that, so that in future we all have these metrics on our fingertips.
Yeah, I mean, I will say most of the points Mansi and Anurag have already covered from a measurement perspective. The only thing I'll add is, as we have made our initial set of investments, our approach is pre-investment. We define and agree on SDG or impact metrics, which are relevant to that business model. And we agree with the founders that these are the metrics that they're going to track and report on, because we strongly believe in the philosophy that what doesn't get measured doesn't get done, or what gets measured gets done, because then the focus remains of the entire team on delivering those metrics apart from financial progress and financial metrics. And as Anurag pointed out, the direct ones are easy to measure. So for instance, we have an investment in a climate company, so we can measure things like water saved, energy saved, and so on and so forth. But it's much harder. It's a different level of effort and complexity if you want to measure the indirect impact of the progress of that company on the broader society or the families, those who've been impacted. So as a minimum, we define and measure metrics for each company on their alignment with SDG goals and how they are tracking. And we give them targets on how they need to progress on a quarter by quarter and a year by year basis on those metrics.
Right, sir. So I think we have now a basic framework of how impact value is getting commercialized and what are the different aspects any startup should consider, the various implications of measurement, the basic importance of having a great team around. So I would like to ask all three of you regarding any of your latest investments or a latest venture which you might have find really interesting, that could have a long-term impact in future and makes it suitable candidate to have associated with both social impact and profitability, both. Any latest venture of yours or a startup that you might have ventured into? Would you like to share some of its details?
Yeah, okay. So if I can go first, Avkash, I mean, we made an investment in a company which we believe has created a product in the healthcare space, but it's a really deep technology product which we believe will help physicians, doctors, in a very meaningful and contextual way when they go about treating their patients, either in a OPD setting or in a remote virtual setting. and also monitoring them. So the impact that this company can deliver, while we hear about a lot of teleconsult companies, but let me tell you, I mean, 8 out of 10 of those companies are only using technology to enable a conversation between a doctor and a patient. Okay. So while a doctor, and Mansi can probably speak to it more, I mean, she's a doctor, that a chat is insufficient for a doctor to diagnose what's wrong with the patient. I mean, you need a lot of contextual information. You need access to history and data of that patient. You need access to medical protocols. You need access to so many things, EMR and records, etc. So this company is actually addressing that problem in a very comprehensive manner, and we believe that in times to come, they will drive that change, which uses technology to provide access and affordable healthcare to the underserved masses of a country like India. Because barring the top six metros in a country like India, I mean, the quality of physicians really drops big time. Okay, and that's why if you go to any hospital in Bangalore, Bombay, Delhi, or wherever, you find that, I mean, they're just overloaded. Whether they are government or private, that's a question of affordability, but all of them are overloaded. All of them have so much demand, because there are people jumping on buses and trains from the hinterland, and whenever they have some issue, they are coming to the nearest metro, nearest city, because they just don't have access. And the telemedicine has been talked about for at least 18, 20 years now, but it hasn't really taken off. But we believe that with the company in which we have invested recently, and there'll probably be more like that, and we need more like that, that things are set to change in the coming years.
Right, right. So maybe just continuing on Dinesh's healthcare thread, I would also like to talk about one of our investments, which is in the diagnostic space. We've all seen it about the diagnostic investment by profit in this particular investment. It's a diagnostic empowers the doctors instead of patients, patients and take owners and the ownership of the diagnosis that happens at the clinic. I think there is a lot of disintermediation that's happening in the industry where the onus is going away from the doctors to the labs, and then people are going directly to the labs for their care, and there is a big
Sorry,
trust
I
deficit.
think you might want to switch off your video. Your voice is cracking up. So
Oh, okay. I'm so sorry about the internet today. Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me now?
yes, we are hearing you. Probably better if you switch off your video so that at least you'll save some.
I've switched off my video. Thanks. I don't know again at what point you couldn't hear me, but one of the companies that we've invested in, it's a point of care diagnostic device, which empowers doctors. I think what was happening in India was that there was a lot of disintermediation. Power was being taken away from doctors, given to labs, which led to inflated pricing. We were trying to address the affordability and accessibility issue, but they actually were creating a trust deficit, which was not beneficial to the patients or the doctors. So we are taking the owners back to the doctors where they can conduct these tests at their clinic. The patient trusts them. The overall care to the patient is better. The diagnosis is better, faster, and that not only leads to impact in terms of quality of care, but really it helps the doctor, who is also at the end of the day a small business owner, become stronger, become more independent, and I think become more liable to the care that is getting provided. So I think that is one of the investment that has led to a larger impact. They're doing about 2.5 million tests a month, which is pretty large, and they're focused mostly in the tier 2 and tier 3 cities, which again, leads itself to a better quality of care for the masses.
Sure. Thanks, Mansi. Maybe I'll go now. So both of you have spoken about healthcare, so maybe I'll pick up another sector. For us, each and every single investment that we made does have to have impact thesis. So I can pick up pretty much any company, but maybe I'll pick up something that I spoke about a little earlier in waste management, because it's also a very unique space. So we have an investment in a company called Nepra, which is headquartered out of Ahmedabad. It's a company that we invested in about 7 years ago when it was just two founders, no capital into the company. We were the first investor. They hardly had any revenues at all. They had a manual operation, very similar to like a kabadiwala of basically collecting waste, segregating it, and selling it to recyclers. We had a thesis in our previous fund through which we made this investment of waste as a theme, which we had identified. This is before again Swachh Bharat mission came into being. But we thought, this is a big problem. And if we can find somebody who is able to find, commercial model around dealing with waste without an engagement with the government, because most of the waste management platforms that we were coming across had the government as the end customer, and we thought that was also a problem because they would eventually run into either receivables issues with the government or through some underhand dealings, corruption issues, etc., which we were not comfortable with. So we scouted the country looking for a model which is devoid of government intervention, has a strong business model in place, and is scalable as well for to create a return on the investment. So we found these two founders in Ahmedabad who were doing some manual segregation and selling to SMEs, and we decided to back them with a very small amount of capital. We gave them an initial check of about 3 crores, and within 3 months of our investment, what they did was they bought a huge amount of waste with that money, stored it in their warehouse, and that warehouse got fire. So everything was burned down to ashes. So it became zilch within no time. But in that 3 months, we had seen enough in terms of the thought process behind how they were going about it. So essentially, what they were doing was at the back end, they were engaging with waste pickers, which is really the poorest of the poor in any city. They were engaging with these people to collect waste. They had a system. They had devised a technology system through which, in a very transparent manner, they were able to procure this waste from these waste pickers, offer them prompt payment at a fair price. They had a system to segregate. Through further capital infusions, what we were able to do was to mechanize that system. We set up very, what are today probably best in class of global standards material recovery facilities, which use high-end optical refractors to segregate this waste at scale. We are then able to, segregate and do some value addition and sell it to SMEs who produce various products out of these waste. So we deal with only dry waste, plastics, papers, glass, metal, etc. We sell it to various recyclers. We are now engaged with some large corporates as well, people like Walmart or IKEA, who want to produce products out of this recycled waste. So circular economy is very much an in thing. Even some large FMCG players like Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Nestle, etc., who are required to basically produce a certificate, what we called EPR, extended producer responsibility, for the waste that they put out in the market. So if you are drinking a bottle of Coke and you're drinking this through a plastic bottle, they are required to certify that that amount of waste that they put in the market is also recycled. So they are coming to us and helping us segregate, basically certify that from their behalf. So it's also created a new revenue streams for this company. We started with this manual facility in Ahmedabad. We've gradually scaled it to 100 metric tons per day of processing facility within Ahmedabad. Based on our experience in Ahmedabad, we went to Indore. Indore, as you know, is ranked #1 in the Swachh Bharat survey. It's supposed to be the cleanest city in India for 3 years in a row. And there was a very progressive commissioner of Indore who invited us, looking at our model in Ahmedabad. So we've set up a 300 metric ton per day facility in Indore. We are in the process of replicating this in Pune, in Mumbai, in Indore, and we're pretty much getting invited by the various municipalities across the country. We set up these plants, and we have this model which is not dependent on the government for its revenue. It's highly profitable. If you're able to do this at scale, you can generate 35% kind of gross margins. The plants typically break even in 6 to 9 months at about 35-40% capacity utilization. So it's highly profitable, unlimited supply, unlimited demand. It deals with the poorest of the poor and solving a big social problem. So it's a perfect example of a social investment. We started with a 3 crore investment. We're in the process of signing a term sheet this week, which will be 180 crore investment into the company as a third round of investment from a fund, the European fund, which is focused on circular economy. It has these large FMCG companies which are LPs of this fund, so they're also looking at it from a strategic point of view. And we have also, in this round of funding, also created an exit from our previous fund, which is roughly 5 times of its value. So it's also generated a big return for the investment.
Thank you, sir, for sharing that wonderful case study of yours, sir. I was able to relate it more with myself, as I've also worked previously with a waste management strategy team earlier on in my career. Sir, I'll just take up couple of questions and then we can maybe conclude the session. So the question goes like this. If there is a trade-off between financial sustainability and impact orientation, how will the decision be made? So any one of you can take up that, sir.
So, Avkash, maybe it's better if you direct the question to a particular person, otherwise
Okay. Dinesh sir, can you just throw some light on this? I'll repeat the question again. If there is a trade-off between financial sustainability and impact orientation, how will the decision be made, sir?
Okay, Avkash, what I tried to do was I tried to type in some answers while Anurag was explaining in the interest of time, because we are already 15 minutes past 1 o'clock. But anyway, the answer to that question would depend on the character of the capital which has been deployed. So first of all, these trade-offs are avoidable. But if there is a trade-off or a conflict that you run into, it will depend on what's the primary objective and what's the secondary objective. So if there is commercial capital, the financial interest will override that. But if there is more foundational capital, CSR type of capital or foundation capital, then it will be the other way around.
Sure, sir. Mansi ma'am, do you have some comments on this question, ma'am?
Sure. So I think, like Dinesh mentioned, it really depends on what your source of capital is to make a trade-off between profitability or impact. But I think fundamentally for all of us that are in sectors, whether it's healthcare, education, construction. I mean, you take some of the sectors that automatically lend themselves to being a mix of sustainability and impact. If you do it right, and I think if the end goal is to really solve a pain point of the customer, and you get your unit economics right, I don't think any company should have to make a trade-off between both, and I don't think that should ever come to the investor as well.
Right, ma'am. Anurag sir, your take on this, sir? If any comments?
No, I think the points are already covered. If you have to make a trade-off between financial sustainability and impact, I would say, although it may not be the most popular thing, you have to look at financial sustainability, because if you don't exist only, then what impact will you make, right? So if you're not able to sustain yourself financially, then your venture itself will shut down. So ideally, you would want a situation where these things are not at cross purposes with each other. In terms of capital that you're raising, you raise debt, you need to service it. Similarly, when you raise equity, you need to service it. If your venture or the business model doesn't have the ability to service it, then you should not raise such capital. Like Dinesh was mentioning, then should go and raise capital through philanthropic sources, and maybe the for-profit structure is not the right format for you to do that.
Thank you, sir.
Avkash, how much more time do we have? Otherwise, I mean, we can also respond via email offline.
Sure, sir. I'll wrap the session, sir. I would like to thank all of you, Dr. Mansi ma'am, Dinesh sir, and Anurag sir, for enriching all our viewers and myself with all your case studies, your examples, your knowledge. It was a really enriching experience, sir. And on behalf of Meraklis and myself, I would like to thank you once again for coming, sir. Thank you, all of you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, please feel free to email the questions if
Sure, sir. Sure. Thanks a lot.
Bye, everyone.
Okay, thanks.
Bye.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.